Thank you so much for this opportunity. And my talk will fit in very nicely following on from the previous two. So I'm going to examine what is a healthy diet and for whom. I have no financial disclosures to make. All my funding is from public bodies. I am an unpaid commissioner of the 2025 Eat Lancet Commission on healthy, sustainable, and just food systems. So before we can answer what is a healthy diet, we should examine what happens when we don't have a healthy diet. So current diets and poor diets, there are different estimates, but this particular estimate done by the Global Burden of Disease Coalition, published in 2019, showed that poor diets can account for up to around 22% of premature deaths. The food that we eat has a very powerful impact on prevention of disease, management of disease, even remission or reversal of disease, as we've seen for type 2 diabetes, and on healthy aging. And food is important. Actually, I've said birth to old adulthood, but actually even pre-birth, and there are also transgenerational effects of diet through the mother into the next generation. And healthy aging is also a really important focus other than just avoiding disease and ultimately a poor quality of life and early death. So what is a healthy diet? According to the World Health Organization, it should optimize health rather than what we saw, which is to lead to poor health. And how is health defined? Well, people question this definition, and there are better ways perhaps, but here it is. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. And one thing that's really important to note is that for decades, the focus of nutritional guidelines had been on that bottom part, which is nutrients. We've all heard about the saturated fat and the fat guidelines and the carbohydrate focus, but really the action needs to happen at the level of what we eat. We don't purchase nutrients, we purchase foods and dietary patterns within which these foods are consumed. So a sole focus on nutrients is misplaced. There was a joint statement from the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization last year defining a healthy diet as basically one that is adequate, balanced, moderate, and diverse. And you can act, it's fairly common sense actually as to what each of those names or nomenclatures mean. And of course, we should note that this would be in the context of a person's physical characteristics, their age, their body mass index, their body size, their gender, whether they're physically active or not, and physiological states, such as whether they're pregnant, lactating, and so on, child or adult, and disease conditions. So out there is no shortage of all sorts of opinions and blogs and vested interests and non-vested interests. You cannot have a day in your life in any country without being bombarded on nutrition messages. So on the left there of the screen, here are some of the evidence-based dietary patterns for which there is a good amount of evidence. I don't know if many of you made it to the plenary talk. There was a slide there about trust in whose voices do you listen to. So if you look at the scientific community by and large, these are the diets. Mediterranean diet, we've known about that for a very long time, for decades. DASH diet, a salt reduction diet mostly for hypertension, healthy eating index, alternative healthy eating index, and so on. And plant-based diets do feature in there. But really important, made just earlier by Karen Papier, was you can have healthy and unhealthy plant-based diets. So there's a health halo around plant-based, but that's misplaced, because within that you can have healthy and unhealthy. And then there are regional diets like Nordic, etc. And the latest in that to add is the Eat Lancet. Now we refer to that as the planetary health diet. But on the right, all sorts of popularized diets. But the latest one with the MAGA and the MAHA in the USA, Make America Healthy Again, ban seed oils replaced with beef tallow. Go figure. Okay, and then all this emphasis on go low fat. Well, what did that do? The supermarkets got inundated with low fat or zero fat products laced with sugar. Again, a nutrient-focused, low-carb diets, ketogenic diets, it leads to different focuses. So the challenge is then how to feed the population a healthy diet. And my job is made easier because the previous speaker covered this already very nicely, so I'll keep it brief. Essentially, the Eat Lancet Commission in 2019 published its report on food, planet, and health. It was published in the Lancet Journal, and unpicking it, what it really comprised in terms of the process was firstly an evidence review of what is a healthy reference diet. And that was a state-of-the-art appraisal of evidence on including observational, long-term cohort studies, randomized trials, and controlled feeding studies. Then we had experts who worked in defining planetary boundaries. At the time, it was the 6 key environmental systems and processes. And then modelers worked on applying a global food systems modeling framework, and then strategies were outlined. So what did this diet really boil down to? Well, you've seen this figure on the right in a slightly different form in the previous talk, but essentially, the detail in terms of numeric targets is shown on the left. And you can see that it's a plant-forward or a plant-focused diet, which includes an emphasis on whole grains as opposed to refined grains, and then keeping potatoes and starchy vegetables to lower limits, but really increasing the non-starchy vegetables, and an emphasis on fruits, so all the plant sources there. And further down, you'll notice the protein sources also include plant sources. So dry beans, lentils weighed there, soy, nuts as plant-based legumes, and nuts and seeds and soy as sources. And then meat and fish and poultry and eggs are allowed as animal source protein sources. So this was really a global dietary recommendation framework aimed at promoting human health and environmental sustainability. And half your plate needs to be basically fruits and vegetables, and the other half is divided into the rest. So broken down further, what it really looks like is that there's an emphasis on those plant sources, and fish is in there alongside the plant-based sources. If somebody prefers to be vegan and they want to avoid all animal source foods, they can do. That's optional, eggs, poultry, dairy foods, and limited intake of red meat and starchy vegetables, added sugars, and saturated fats. And the planetary health diet allows a range of options from flexitarian or omnivorous to, I should also say, pescatarian in there, or vegetarian or vegan. So there's a common myth that the planetary health diet is a vegan or a vegetarian diet. It's not. It's perfectly compatible with all of these options. So what about the evidence on the planetary health diet? Now, you saw some slides earlier from the EPIC Oxford study and the work led by the Oxford team. This, I'll show you just 2. One on the association of the Planetary Health Index and total mortality. So this is all-cause deaths. This was a very large sample of more than 200,000 people, and there were nearly 55,000 deaths recorded. Okay, and here, essentially, as across the tenths or deciles of the score of the planetary health diet, this was scored from 0 to 140. You see a pretty impressive dose-response relationship. Higher achievement of the diet, lower all-cause mortality. And this is in comprehensively adjusted analysis. It includes all sorts of adjustments for lifestyles and body mass index and so on. This slide, please don't take pictures of it, if you wouldn't mind. This is not yet published, but it is soon going to be published in August. This is work we've done from Cambridge with the parallel study to EPIC Oxford, which is run out of Cambridge and is called the the EPIC Norfolk study. What we did here was to look at people who were free of diabetes, but who developed type 2 diabetes over the follow-up period. And here we had 24,000 adults and 3,500 new cases of type 2 diabetes. And again, what we see here, if you just focus on these blue highlighted results there, that with increasing adherence to the planetary health diet, there was a lower incidence of diabetes. Now, we also modeled the population attributable fraction And if all the participants had met up to the quartile 4 there, which is 85 points, the current median being around 75 points, so just 10 points higher, then in this cohort, nearly 12% of diabetes cases would not have happened. Okay. Now, in both the results that I have put up, both for mortality and for this, both studies also looked at greenhouse gas emissions. I haven't got time to show you that, but the headline result is that just like you saw before, those were also higher adherence was related with lower greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so there are some options for us as a society, as a community, as the world, and as individuals, and of course politicians. We can either go for the win-win, shown here in the right-hand bottom quadrant, where we achieve the scientific targets within the safe operating space, both for the food that people consume and also for the overall food system, the food production. That win-win is clearly the optimal. But we can also have other options where we meet one and not the other. So we either end up with win-lose or lose-win, or we can lose in every way by transgressing all of these boundaries. So the choice is ours and the need is urgent, as we've heard repeatedly. Okay, so healthy for whom? Well, the diet is aimed to be healthy for all. Actually, the diet has been designed for age 2 onwards for throughout the world. And here are just some examples from some different world regions on what the planetary health diet would look like on your regional plate. And there are many other examples from India, from parts of Africa and Mexico and so on. But this is just a few examples from Vietnam, China, and Costa Rica. And of course, don't forget the Mediterranean diet is also perfectly compatible largely with the planetary health diet. So we have all that knowledge, but there's a massive gap, and we need to mine that gap. If we contrast North America with sub-Saharan Africa, the picture looks very different for what currently the gap is between what the recommendation is and what the current food intakes are. So in North America, you can see that the budget is blown completely at more than 6-fold currently the red meat consumption. Within sub-Saharan Africa, it's within the boundary, but starchy vegetables are massively inflated at 7-fold higher. And what I just want to illustrate on the next slide is how do we get to the healthy diet? So this is looking across all the different world regions. And what is really, really clear is all the stuff that is good for us globally and in every region is below the recommendation. And I think that's a worrying issue. And this will need just transformation, and justice needs to be built into the transformation. And the other point to note is that the solutions will be different in different places. It won't be the same. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. So the last point I want to make is there is also information gap. There's data gap and research gap. This was research we picked up on meat, red meat and processed meat, which is the most contentious issue within the planetary health diet. And here what we find is that there are data deserts. So in the whole of Africa, we could find no study. This is the world's largest study on meat intake and diabetes. We had nearly 2 million adults from 31 cohorts. And in Asia, all we could find was one tiny study in Bangladesh. And lots of areas have simply no data. So we need investment in these countries and these regions. So really, the summary is that the recommendations are universal, and they do address most forms of poor diet and health issues. Meat consumption and caloric security are context-specific issues and underconsumption of the good items, as it were, but lack of research needs to be addressed. And in reality, the consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes will need to double, and that of meat will have, of sugar will need to be halved. And pathways will need to be implemented in a just transformation. Thank you very much.